upon our past, reflect upon our ancestors, our elders, and their words of wisdom. Sojourner Truth. I'm not going to die. I'm going home like a shooting star. And while I certainly appreciate the words of Sister Truth, right, she was not simply a shooting star. Right? Shooting stars, when you see them, fade away into the night. And that is not what Sister Truth did, right? She shot up into the sky, landed in the sky there, and has stayed there as a particular as a north star, guiding our ways forevermore. And there's ways in which her work, her will, remain present to this day. And so thinking about this notion of the neo-revolution, or even just the revolution. I mean, I think it was mentioned earlier today that the revolution of today is different than it was for the 60s, different than it was for the 1800s, different than it was for our enslaved ancestors. And some of that is true, right? The times are different. That is true. Right? We don't have signs anymore, at least not those that we can see to say, enter through this door, not here. Drink from this fountain, not here. Work for free. Right? We don't have those kinds of things anymore. So what is the revolution of our time? What is the revolution of our time? What is the revolution of your time? Right? We have this particular way in which, right, President Obama gets elected, not just once, but twice. Right? And I dare to say that, man, if you give any brother 6 months to interview for a job, he's going to get it. Right? You give any brother. But that is not the state in which we live in today. Right? There is still discrimination that exists in employment. There is still discrimination that exists when we go in the housing market. There is still discrimination that exists in education. That is the reality. Independent of the fight, independent of the time, not much has changed. But how we proceed, though, is so complex. The young brother that was here before performing his poem, and if we could just quickly give it up to Urban Lyrics real quick. That internal dialogue that we have, sometimes amongst each other, but most definitely within ourselves about how to proceed in this day and age is very difficult, about what it means to be successful, right? I mean, by every standard of success, right, it aren't necessarily ones that we've created, a degree, paid, right? And all the while, we have to try to attain those things, and in some cases break away from the kind of traditions, the kind of homes that we've grown up in, right? That's a different type of evolution, of self. Again, today we have whites making, on an annual basis, $52,000 compared to blacks at $34,000. The infant mortality rate for babies of black women is 2.4 times the rate of babies of white women. The mortality rate is 3.3 times greater for black population than for the white population. That 10.6% of the white U.S. population in 2007 lived below the official poverty threshold of $21,000 for a family of four, compared to 24.4. And that 10.7% of black male population aged 30 to 34 was incarcerated, versus 1.9% of the white male population. Y'all tell me, right? I mean, yes, there are some things that have changed. I'm not standing before you if they haven't. You are not in this room with me if they haven't. But there is still a fight to be had. Again, how we proceed, though, I'll clue y'all in. I don't have answers. I don't have the answers, but we got to talk about it. We got to continue to talk about it. So, again, those are the why the revolution is still necessary. Defining the revolution. I was trying to find words that kind of guide me to thinking about what this revolution is. And I'm still, teach a class in rap and spoken word guided by poetry and rap music. Right? Think about the words of Langston Hughes and what happens to a dream deferred. Right? The end of that poem, the very end of that poem, what happens to a dream deferred? His last word is boom. You know, are we there yet? I mean, Langston saw what was going to happen in that 30s and the riots that were coming through. Langston saw the 60s. You know, are we building up that same kind of pressure for that kind of revolution to happen? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Gil Scott-Heron talked about the revolution not being televised and his particular call for concern for the kind of ways in which capitalism, materialism was taken over, the notion of the revolution, right? Rather, the revolution will not be brought to you by Dr. Dre Beats. Will not be brought to you by fake hipster glasses, by millions of likes on your Facebook or tweets. It will not be brought to you by YouTube clips of the Harlem Shake. What the hell is that? There's some people in Harlem that are not happy about that. Let me tell y'all. Let me tell y'all. Because that ain't the Harlem, that's right. That ain't the Harlem Shake. And no matter how many times you wear it, just donning the chair shirt will not bring about the revolution. Chair on the revolution. It is not an apple that falls when it is not an apple that falls when it is ripe. You have to make it fall. You have to make it fall. Very simple statement. Right? It is this need to act that Che is calling for. And there is no greater example of that, independent of some of the things that he's done, that he did, while providing leadership. Right? No greater example of someone that understood action than Che. In the way that he went, not just simply to represent, right, his native land of Argentina, but the way that he represented Cuba. The way that he understood himself as not just a man of Latin America, but a man of the world, particularly a man of the oppressed people. And he didn't think twice when it came to going to Africa to fight there, even though that attempt was unsuccessful. Again, we could disagree about what he did, or we could have discourse about his faults. Right? But there was a particular kind of dedication to action that we must appreciate. And again, our revolution, that might be one of those things, will be different than the one that Che was thinking about. And so what will the revolution need? Old Negro spiritual. I'm not going to sing. Children, we shall be free. Children, we shall be free when the Lord shall appear. We want no cowards in our band that will their colors fly. We call for valiant-hearted men that are not afraid to die. Particular kind of call with what the revolution needs. What the revolution needs. Sonia Sotomayor, sister was just first Latino in the U.S. Supreme Court. Although I grew up in very modest and challenging circumstances, I consider my life to be immeasurably rich. Certain kind of revolution right there in terms of redefining what it means to be rich. Redefining success. And while she's reached a particular kind of pinnacle, she understands, again, that her richness is not going to be labeled. It's not going to be defined by those things. The revolution requires reflection and internal critique. When you look at the work of someone like Kendrick Lamar, having a very clear conversation with himself, a very public conversation with himself about who he is and his particular kind of limitations, when he states very succinctly, I am a sinner, and I know I'm going to sin again. There are ways in which there is constant reflection, whether we look at the work of Sonia Sotomayor, whether we look at the work of Kendrick Lamar, whether we think about the old Negro spiritual and what it is that is required of us in this time of need and of revolution. And so I leave you a little bit thinking about the words that Martin shared here. Actually, I got a little bit more after Martin, but how we doing on time? We okay? We're okay? All right. Again, thinking about what it is that the revolution needs. Martin addressed Oberlin College, small school in Ohio, in the mid-60s. And this particular speech is called Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution. And you know, I wasn't familiar with this speech, but I wanted to hear, what did Martin have to say when it came to the word revolution? Because that is not the image that we think of when we think of Martin, right? We think of him as a bit more of a pacifist. We understand that revolution requires action, and sometimes, you know, pacifist, that is a particular kind of action, yes. But Martin understood, right, that a revolution was bound. And he led off that particular speech by talking about Rip Van Winkle. People familiar with Rip Van Winkle? I had to look it up, because that's what I do now. I didn't know it. I Googled it. I should have known this, though. Rip Van Winkle? The story? That guy leaves his family, goes up into the mountains, and what happens?
And then he comes back and he's like unrecognizable by everybody. They're kind of like, who are you? These two kids, they're like grown up and they're like, Daddy, who are you? He's like, I'm Rip. I know you're not.
It's like 20 years went by, right? One boy knocked out for 20 years. And what happened in that 20 years, though?
Revolution?
The American Revolution, right? Right? I mean, this is particular Martin's use of Rip Van Winkle as a particular kind of cautionary tale in asking his brothers and his sisters, another set of words that maybe we've lost in saying to each other, right? And asking his brothers and sisters, will you be Rip Van Winkle? Will you be sleeping through the revolution? Will you wake up 20 years later and not be recognized? Not recognize the kind of state that we're in? All I'm saying is simply this, that all mankind is tied together. All life is interrelated, and we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. John Donne caught it years ago and placed it in graphic terms. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. And then he goes on toward to the end to say, any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind and therefore never send to know whom the bell tolls for. It tolls for thee. And by believing this, by living out this fact, we will be able to remain awake through a great revolution. Right? This very kind of clear statement that no man succeeds upon themselves. Oprah did not succeed by herself. Jay did not succeed by himself. Sonia did not succeed by herself. Right? There's a particular kind of way in which, as communities, together, right, we propel forward. And so I ask you again, think about Sojourner's quote. I'm not going to die. I'm going to go home like a shooting star. What words will you speak? What actions will you take? For when it is your day to die, my hope is that the decisions you make will allow you to go home like a shooting star, whose will linger and shine bright like a guiding star. And when our grandchildren reflect upon the night sky, not only will they, or at least I hope they will be living, in a more loving, in a more just place, a just world, but I hope that they can look upon the stars and see me, and see you, and see us for guidance. Revolution! 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 Thank you.